You have an update on some of the figures coming in from Paris this Saturday.
Well, that's right. This, compared to last week, is a much bigger clampdown on protesters. This time last week we had several dozen who've been arrested. Now, the latest figures say 514 people have been arrested and 272 are remanded in custody. So it's, I think, the police are absolutely determined to stop any repetition of what happened last week. Okay, we've got these pictures we're seeing now of tear gas being fired at the top right-hand end of the Champs-Élysées, just near the Arc de Triomphe. This is not just vandals coming in. I think there have been some clashes with police because they feel that the protesters, that they are actually hemmed into the Champs-Élysées and don't have any way of moving around and doing what they want to do, because there is so much worry on the part of the law and order forces. 8,000 gendarmes and police deployed in Paris, 89,000 around the country today to try to control these protests. But even if, as our correspondent was just saying a few minutes ago, it's calm, people are walking up and down the avenue, that doesn't mean that from one minute to the next things can't completely get out of control. And we've had one or two skirmishes in the Champs-Élysées already, which is a sign that even though it seems to be taking peacefully, everything seems to be going okay so far. It's certainly calmer than it was this time last Saturday. It doesn't mean that things can't get out of hand very quickly.
Now, Philip, this is, of course, the fourth consecutive weekend of Gilets jaunes unrest. Is it fair to say, or is it accurate in any way to say that this is becoming more political as it mushrooms out? We're hearing that the far left and the far right are now jumping on board this Saturday.
Well, actually not, because I think that they have tried, the far right, in the figure of Marine Le Pen, whose party is now called the National Rally, the former National Front. There's also the far left with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. There's even the traditional right-wing Republican Party, which has tried to cash in on this movement to criticise the government. The movement's remained aloof outside the political spectrum, but there have been attempts along the line to try to recuperate this movement, which haven't really worked up until now. But that doesn't mean, as a result of that, this movement isn't a threat to Emmanuel Macron and to the government of Edouard Philippe. It all depends now on how things go today, how this plays out. Will it turn violent or not? Will this be a peaceful movement, or are we going to see a lot of clashes later on today? We'll have to wait and see how that turns out. And the second big question, of course, everyone is asking is, what is Emmanuel Macron himself going to say when he's due to speak on Monday? He's waiting for this weekend to play out. He's waiting for this weekend to come to an end before he makes announcements to try to pacify the protesters. We don't know what he's going to say, but he's going to have to come up with some kind of pledge, some kind of juicy bone for them to chew on, if you like, which will stop them from going out and continuing their protest movement. It really is not very easy. Let's put it simply, Emmanuel Macron is facing a juggling act.
I think it's also important to mention perhaps the average French citizen, the average French voter. How are they looking on this unrest? We saw a fresh opinion poll published on Friday.
Well, the first opinion poll said that 80% of French people backed the yellow vest, the Gilets jaunes movement. That has gone down a little bit, I think, for two reasons. First, because of the violent scenes we saw last weekend in Paris, which are not only bad news for the protesters, but it's also really bad news for France and France's image overseas, bad news for retail. So there is, and for hotels and for tourist attractions. So there is pressure on the yellow vest movement to protest peacefully and not for their movement to be infiltrated by extremists. That's the first aspect. And the second aspect, I think many people are saying, well, look, you've been protesting now for a month. You have got concessions from the government. You got this fuel price hike removed. You've had a pledge not to increase gas and electricity prices. The government's obviously going to come up with another measure on Monday. Why are you still protesting? And the reply from the Yellow Vest movement is, well, we want more than that. We want a boost to the minimum wage. We want pensioners not to pay any tax at all. We want taxes removed on many different aspects of French society. So therefore, we're going to carry on this protest movement until we do. And we've even got some people who are taking themselves to being Lamartine in the 1848 uprising, wanting to move into the Élysées Palace and execute Emmanuel Macron and declare a new republic. So with all those different factions within this movement, it's very difficult to know who is actually in control.
Philip Turle, thank you very much.